Thank you, Sam, and good afternoon, everyone. I know that everybody's excited about HMDA, not nearly as excited as you're going to be after the Bureau gets hold of this. But as of today, HMDA is HMDA. Haven't had any major changes, but it's still time to audit. And we want to make certain that we're auditing because we don't want to have our financial institutions fined significantly, even fined a little bit. So remember that as auditors, we are their belts and suspenders. We're here to protect them. They sometimes look at us simply as a cost center, not as a revenue generator. I prefer to think of us as insurance. So next time they complain, show them one of those citations where one of the other financial institutions was fined for HMDA violations. So today we're going to go over, kind of give you a refresher and make certain that you know as the auditor what it is you're looking for and how to find them. And then additionally, for those of you who are not the auditors, but you're actually in charge of HMDA or a compliance officer, something along those lines, we want you to know how to find your own errors and to know what either your auditor or your examiner is going to be looking for. So let's get started. We're going to talk about those rate spreads. I still see some misconceptions on how we do the rate spreads. We're going to be talking about how you're going to, as the auditor, identify potential HMDA applications from the loan and denial files. When I do a HMDA review for a bank, I prefer not to call them audits. I think of auditing as ticking in time, so I do this review. And I do it from two directions because, one, I will look at the HMDA LAR, and from there I'll select some that I'm going to review to test to make certain first that they should indeed be on the LAR, and then secondly that all of those data entries are correct. But how do I know that we didn't miss something that should have been reported? So to do that, I go and I look through loan and denial files. So I'm going to give you tips on what I look for to see if maybe I'm going to test it to see if maybe it should have been included on that LAR. We're going to talk about how to root out the real story behind withdrawn applications. Withdrawns, we really seem to still have some problems in understanding what's withdrawn versus what was approved, not accepted, or maybe even, worst case scenario, one that should be instead denied. We're going to talk about the difference between temporary and short-term financing. We're going to find a way to recognize refinancings that were previously not reportable. HMDA does have some odd things in it. You know, we have some that are never reported, and there's some that are going to be reported that wouldn't have been reported to begin with. A little odd. Spotting, I can't talk this afternoon, possible errors from simply looking at the LAR. There's going to be some suggestions there. And we're also going to talk about how to verify the data accuracy against source documents. You can never take just the LAR itself and tell whether it's right. You have to look at all the source documents. Some of my clients, when I go in, they want to hand me their LAR input sheet. No, that's still not going to work for me. That tells me what someone interpreted. To be an auditor, I have to look at the source documents to make certain that that information is correct. So that's my goal in life, is to help them understand that. So let's talk about rate spreads. It's the simplest part to me, but we're having problems with it. It's simple because the system is out there for us. I love it when they give me a tool. And there is a tool out there on the FFIEC's website. It does the calculation for you. So I've got it set up as a bookmark, so it automatically takes me to the new calculator because I no longer need the old calculator. If I were doing an audit of something a few years old, I might, but anyway, so what I'm going for there is all I have to do is input this information, and they will calculate it for me. So love it. Now, one of my favorite things, for those of you who are not the auditors, if you want to make me happy, don't know about your auditors, but if you want to do a print screen of that, then I know exactly what you did. Not only does it help, first off, to show that you are doing it correctly, but if you're doing it incorrectly, I know why yours was incorrect. I could see that maybe the action taken date was different, excuse me, not action taken, but when the rate set date was different than what I used to calculate. If maybe you used incorrectly the interest rate instead of the APR, if there was something on the spread there as far as the rounding, I can tell if there was a variance there. So remember that to report that spread, you're showing the difference between the annual percentage rate and the applicable average prime offer rate, which is if that spread is equal to or greater than 1.5 percentage points for first lien or 3.5 for subordinate liens. Now, notice here that it doesn't say anything about whether this was their principal residence, it was a vacation home. But what it does state, first off, that it's saying this is an APR, not the interest rate. So the first thing that I find that financial institutions or whoever's doing the LAR at this point is doing incorrectly is that they are reporting this on non-Reg Z reportable or covered transactions. I'll give you a little information on that in a moment. If you'll look here at this, I have the new calc for you. I've got the link, and if you want to look at that, this is where all you have to do is input this information. If you want to look, these are only for originated loans. You notice that? Action taken 1. So if this is a denied or withdrawn or approved not accepted that you'd given an early truth in lending on, this goes by the final truth in lending, and you report this only on those originated loans. So here I want to look at for the lock date. You're going to record that APR, what the loan maturity is if it was fixed, and then the lien status, and you hit submit. It's just lovely. Not certain why we have a problem with that, but a lot of it has to do with being concerned about the lock-in date. So let's talk about that. Let's look at our tips here. First, for rate spreads, if I'm the auditor, whenever I see a rate spread, I select a good proportion of my selection from those that have rate spreads because I want to make certain we're calculating those correctly. So my first tip is if I see an occupancy code of 2, that means it's not occupied as a principal residence. Now, remember, this code's also used to identify consumer vacation and second homes, but it can indicate rental properties that are not covered by Reg Z. So when I am looking to do my selection for my penetration of my review, I'm going to not only just randomly select some of those that have a rate spread to make certain they're calculated correctly, I also make certain out of that selection that I pick some that have a code 2 for occupancy, because that's simply saying that it's not my principal residence. I really do wish they had a different code for, secondary residence, and then another would be for rental properties, but they don't. They have those merged. So that's my first tip, and I will make certain that I look at those to see if it's somebody that's really covered by Reg Z or not. Because what some financial institutions do, a lot of my clients are fairly small, meaning they're $250 million in assets or less. And those are real community bankers, and they over-disclose routinely. That is not a bad thing unless you're getting into this, because they will routinely give Reg Z disclosures, those truth in lending disclosures, on loans that are not covered by Reg Z. So let's talk about what that means. Your exemption for Reg Z applies to non-owner occupied rental housing. So in other words, I might have a vacation home. Let's say I have a condo down on the beach in South Padre, Texas. And so if I have that condo, if I rent that out and I do not occupy it more than 14 days in a year, so if I'm there only 2 weeks out of the year or a week out of the year, that is non-owner occupied rental housing. So if I rent that out even 1 day of the rest of that time, that is not covered by Reg Z. So the fact that your financial institution gives a truth in lending disclosure, and therefore I, as the HMDA input clerk, may find a Reg Z, an APR, in order to disclose, it should not be disclosed on the LAR. So it is a reportable transaction, but you're not going to show that annual percentage rate within that section there. So that field would be in A because it's not Reg Z covered. So this is one of the first things that I look for as the auditor is I look for something that is going to tell me whether or not it's their principal residence. If it's not the principal residence, I'm going to look to see if possibly it is something that shouldn't have a rate spread at all. Also, while we're on this particular section and talking about APRs, one of the things that you notice that the calculation begins with the date that the rate, not the APR, but the rate was set. If your financial institution or the particular loan that you're looking at is something that you ordinarily have a lock date, then that's just real simple. I go from that lock date. But a lot of the smaller financial institutions do not use lock dates. They don't have lock commitments. They just don't do that. And so what you will need is the auditors to find out when was the last time that interest rate set prior to consummation. And so that'll be something.